Awesome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to catch this Hartford Athletic Youth Soccer Roundtable. It's an honor to be here and really excited to kind of see where this conversation goes. I know we're all meeting virtually, so it's not quite going down the line. But Andy, if you want to kick it off just with a quick introduction, and if everyone just wants to introduce themselves to get people situated and acquainted with who's on the call.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Okay, my name's Andy Martino. I've been at Southampton Football Club now for over 20 years, working in the academy, and in my daytime job, football development manager of the global team, working with our international academy partners.
And Paul, if you want to go next.
Yeah, so my name's Paul Buckle. I'm senior advisor to Bruce. Be a big part of the decision making, anything on the football side at Hartford, and also business as well now as we start to develop as a club. So that's basically my role, and it's a really enjoyable one.
I'm just going down the screen here. Liam, you're next on my Zoom screen, so if you want to go next.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. I'm Liam O'Connell. I'm the USL Senior Director of Youth Development. Prior to taking on this role, where I really not just oversee the USL Academy platform, but the overall player and coach development initiatives for all of our professional clubs, as well as clubs in League Two. I was working for Sporting Kansas City, building out their youth soccer department at the grassroots level, and connecting all of the clubs best to Sporting Kansas City's academy and senior teams. So happy to be here, and thanks for the time, guys.
Awesome. And Mark, you're next on my screen again, so if you just want to go next.
Sure, thanks, John. So Mark Abrahams, I'm the Director of Business and Community Partnerships at Southampton Football Club. Been at the club not quite as many years as Andy, but 17 years in total, so it's flown by. But key remit really is to build partnerships either within the UK or overseas, and football partnerships are a key asset that we focus on. To find like-minded partners, really, and US and Hartford is clearly one of those opportunities we're working with.
And he doesn't need much of an introduction for Hartford Athletic fans, but Bruce wanted to give you the floor as well.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan, and thanks everybody for joining. I'm Bruce Mandell, one of the three main owners of Hartford Athletic, with Joe California Sr. and Scott Schooley, and we're really excited to partner with the USL as an amazing league, and Southampton as just a great partner, and we're a growing partnership. And New England Soccer Journal has been along the way doing, I think, one of the best jobs in American sports of reporting on the local scene and really driving the conversation, which I really appreciate, for the growth of soccer. And 2026 is a World Cup in the United States, and we got a lot of work to do, guys, to get prepared, and I think we're all part of it, which is really exciting. So thanks for throwing this together, and thanks for leading it, Jonathan.
Definitely, and I think we got everyone with introductions as I'm scrolling through the Zoom ticker at the top here. So I was just hoping to get underway with, we're connecting shortly after Hartford Athletic, of course, announces its own youth soccer platform. One that's really geared towards the upcoming USL youth initiatives, the USL Academy Cup, and having a group involved there that's spanning U15 through U19 and really looking to pool across all of Connecticut. Bruce, if you wanted to start, kind of walk people through this approach, because I know it's a very delicate one. It's one that's not taken lightly. It's one that's in context of a landscape with a lot of people who are deep-rooted with their own clubs, and you guys were trying to approach that very carefully. Why take this approach? Why does this make sense for the club to start off?
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Well, I think the important thing is in Connecticut, we really want to leverage the existing platforms here in Connecticut and drive youth soccer and create a platform so that you can go from youth all the way through pro. And now Hartford Athletic, with the pro team in Connecticut, provides for Connecticut the top of the pyramid with launching spots beyond Hartford. And the question really is, how do we approach that? Do we come in with a club and grab as many great kids as we can? Or do we partner with the existing structure and try to find the best players, offer them some additional opportunities, and really try to take them to the next level? We decided to go with the latter route. We want to be business friendly to the clubs that exist. And these are premier clubs. These are academy. We even drop down to the town and rec because I think we start at really with the young kids and bring them up. And what we want to provide is the highest level of professional, very serious professional training to bring them to the next level. This is a path upwards towards professional. This is the future for us. We want to have a young club at the professional level, and we want to drive kids up, and not just Connecticut, but Western Mass too, and give them an opportunity that really hasn't existed before in this area. So we've been reaching out to all of the clubs in the area. We're talking to them. We're learning from them. They have a lot more experience in this area than us. But what we're trying to bring to the table is really this opportunity and this guide for kids to be able to make it to the pro level. So that is our approach. Along the way, we have tremendous support from the USL and from Liam, who I think is really a leader in his field, and trying to navigate, which Jonathan, you point out, can be tricky waters. And, clubs can get nervous about all of a sudden a pro team coming in and how's this going to impact the youth kind of area. And working with them, I think, is the best way to try to get the best kids in Connecticut to have opportunities that they've never seen before.
Yeah, and as Bruce mentions, Liam, I just wanted to bring you in to the conversation there. There's many different approaches USL teams have taken with their youth initiatives. We see clubs like San Antonio, Sacramento, St. Louis, producing players at a high volume, not just for college soccer, but the equivalent of homegrown players, youth national teams, etc. They're also leading the charge. But conversely, there's different approaches, and not that model doesn't work for everyone. So why do different models, in your opinion, work in different markets? And how do you kind of guide clubs through that entry point? Because getting it right off the bat seems imperative and really important.
Yeah. First off, I just have to thank Bruce and Paul, especially because they've been working with me since, honestly, I started this having the opportunity to be in this role, and they've been incredibly receptive to just throwing different ideas on the wall. And I think that's really where this all started, because to your point, like, the reality is we're a continent. We're an incredibly large, spread out country with very diverse, different communities and populations. And in turn, there's different challenges to that. And there's a reason why we haven't met our potential as a footballing soccer nation yet, right? And yet there's no reason why we shouldn't someday. But I think part of that is because we've been trying to sometimes create this cookie cutter approach to youth development for everywhere across the U.S. when that's just not going to work. You look at the Northeast is a great example where travel isn't a big issue. So you don't have to spend as much time and money traveling to go find competition, but then you might have space for training and games, and facilities may be at a premium. Whereas you look at a place like El Paso, which is a phenomenal player pool, especially being right on the border, some incredible players, but they're so remote, they have the opposite problem. They have no issue finding space to play and finding talent, but it's incredibly difficult to go and get out of town to travel and find good, consistent competition at a high level. So we're really trying to empower our clubs. We want to give some general best practices, and that starts with what Bruce just said. Before just staking a flag in the ground and saying, we are the new pro club in town, we're going to tell you how things are done. We think it's best to first acknowledge that there are programs, people, clubs, organizations that have been around sometimes for decades, investing time and money and effort into youth development. And so I think if we can all collectively find a way to work together for the greater good of player development in these communities, it's only going to help us. And I really now look toward, after giving a few ideas, I'm looking towards Bruce, Paul, and everyone on this call to determine through this process what is going to be the next best path forward for Connecticut soccer. But it's one that excites me for sure.
Definitely, I would agree with that. And Paul, I just wanted to bring you in as well, because you offer a very astute and important technical point of view on this. When you look at the youth project that Hartford is really launching, what is it that gives you optimism? Why is this something that you're confident in? And how do you just kind of view this delicate walk that Liam and Bruce just spoke to? If he's still there.
We just lost him again.
We lost him? All right.
We'll
Mindful of that. Okay. Okay, so I will jump to, okay, so we'll just transfer over. So Andrea, Mark, if either of you want to take this, this is a very different conversation that we have here in the States than the ones that you all have in the UK, to put it lightly. Incredibly, incredibly different. How do you view these challenges from afar? Because we live it every day, and I'm curious to hear what a overseas perspective might be on these unique challenges that the geographical expanse of the United States present when trying to determine the appropriate youth soccer approaches here.
Okay, shall I take this one, Mark?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Okay, obviously, you know, as the UK, we're a small island, but we still do have so our pathway for our young players is still quite a restriction, as well as so we have slightly different challenges to come across. So if I give you an example, our grassroots games, so the academy, we will start looking at players from under 6 to under 8 in our pre-academy section. So obviously they're at local rec clubs, if you like. So they'll be playing at their local community clubs. And then we have the pre-academy sessions where we will bring those players in to start working with them, starting to develop them, and also giving experiences of what an academy can then look like. And then from under 9s, we have to make a decision of whether we're going to sign these players, but we're now restricted to a 60-minute travel time from our training ground. So we, if you like, can draw a circle around where our training ground is, and that's the radius that we have to recruit from within. So that gives us quite a small area, as you can imagine. And then as the players then develop into the under 12, which we go into the youth phase from the foundation phase, that is then extended to a 90-minute travel time. So all of a sudden you have those players, but then now we've just added another 30 minutes travel time on, which has given us a bigger circumference now to recruit from within. So again, that makes challenges then for us then with players who have been with us from under 9s. Do we retain those players? Do we then look at the players from the outskirts that we couldn't before? And then as the players get older, and then from under 14s, we have the option then to bring them into a full-time model where they can stay with host families and be schooled within the areas of the training ground. So then we can then bring players in from much further afield from there. So we do have restrictions from there, and then within the academy setup as well. So once players are signed, players can still move between other academies. So depending on what category you are. So at Southampton, we've got the category 1 status, which is a top status, which took a lot of hard work from all the staff, but something we're really proud and privileged to hold that status. And then players can then be moving between clubs, but then there are compensation levels that come into account from there.
It's a very different challenges we have to what Liam said. You're a continent, so understandably there's going to be a different way of doing things. And Paul clearly feels back on now, and I'm sure he's better placed to talk about understanding what happens in the UK and what happens in the US and where the learnings can be really.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to be very. Can you guys hear me?
We are good. Yes, you are.
Yeah, good
connection.
Yeah, I mean, I've come away a little bit more from the technical side, being a consultant now. So I tread carefully, and unless I'm asked, I don't really delve into that side. I mean, the key for me was to not crash in for Bruce and Hartford, not to crash into the community. And what I mean by that is upsetting everybody. I'd had experience of that at Sacramento where we tried to do it right, but it was too fast. I think the approach that we've taken with the 14s and affiliating with Southampton is non-threatening and a very good strategic move, because there's no better leader, certainly in the Premier League for me, than Southampton. And of course, working in there and seeing the levels, that's the type of level that I'd like to see Hartford work at, and other clubs in USL, because I think we should all be helping each other. I think that's the take with USL and Liam and Jake, and that's certainly my take on it as well, is to be open and help each other, because we really do have a duty to create the best environment for these young players and sort of take our individual goals out of it for a minute. And that for Hartford would be the best facilities we can possibly get. That's our goal, and the best coaching. So the level of coaching, the attention to detail and the care that Southampton show is everything. It's reflective of me and everything that I believe in. So you do have to be a bit careful as well, I believe, in America, in some areas where you're trying to bring a different approach. I saw that, and I don't mind sharing it, when I did the American Pro license, for example, where it's run by the Dutch. And, you know, you can get this thing now with, you know, well, this is America and let's do it our way. So you do have to tread carefully, in my opinion. But I do believe the way we're doing it at the moment at Hartford is the right way. It's the right way. And we must pay total respect to the community and all of those coaches and organisations that have been running for quite a considerable amount of time. So that's my take on it. And I'm really, really happy the way we've done it at Hartford so far, and would like to, you know, obviously share that in the future, you know, with Liam and USL to other clubs.
Definitely. And Bruce, I just wanted to come back to you as well, because we've talked about how purposeful and guided this approach is, but it's also geared towards an acknowledgement of, we've talked about this before, you and I, the Connecticut youth soccer market and landscape really feeling like it hasn't reached its potential, that there's so many other levels still to reach. Can you just take people into your thinking and your logic there? Because I think that's an incredibly important perspective, where Connecticut's almost been caught between, if I'm a youth player and I want to realize my potential, you either go south to New York City or you take a long drive to the Revolution market. And it can be a little isolating at times, but in theory, and I think we all hope, this Hartford initiative would help to bridge that gap.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I want to touch on something Paul said first, because I think it really sets the stage, is that our investment in youth soccer is really on the staffing side and then facility side. So for us, the number one point that we have to be good at is we have to have the absolute best licensed coaching, analyst, strength and fitness, nutritionist, across the board, the best. And we want to be a leader in that. And that's where we're going to focus our resources. So that's number one. And I think that's going to be something that's going to have an impact on Connecticut and Western Mass soccer. To your point, Liam, there's just a factual part of life for a young American kid, which is that they have so much on their plate, and travel is really a big deal. And you may look at Connecticut and say, oh, we're very close to New York or Boston, but if you know how it works, it doesn't work like that. I mean, to go from Hartford to New York might be 80 miles. It might take you 3 hours. And doing that 3 or 4 times a day is just very, very difficult on the development of a player. So if we can provide the highest level of staffing, support, professionalism, I think that gives these kids an opportunity to develop. And to the point that we're not saying that a move from Hartford at some point up to, and it might be up to, okay, the Revs or NYCFC or the Red Bulls, that's fantastic. If we can be part of that pyramid and we can combine, and we will, with these clubs, which we have great relationships with, we think that's a very positive thing. But it should be done in a way that the kids have choice and the ability to grow in a professional, high-level environment. And yes, Connecticut is providing that at certain levels, and it's our goal, and we'll say it straight out, to provide it at next level. We are saying that, and that's what the relationship with someone like Southampton brings to the table. It's with someone like Paul Buckle. It's with Coach Jaidi, who, remember, was a U23 coach at Southampton. So imagine what he knows about and has lived, okay, coaching up, identifying, developing young players. I believe in the last game Southampton played, 4 or 5 players were on the 18 that came up from last year's U23 team. Just think about that. We now have that kind of knowledge with Paul and coach here in Connecticut. Well, we want to use it and use it in that friendly way that we're talking about with players can stay with their clubs. The clubs can continue their businesses. The clubs can continue to train these guys and do a great job and then pop them up to the next level. That's the model. And we're very open, and Liam has been incredibly helpful. We're very open to learning along the way. But I think if we start with the right foundation, then we can use the learnings along the way to pivot. And the pivot has to be to create the best opportunity for these young kids to get all the way up the level. And we've been short of that, Jonathan, in Connecticut, to your point. We've had kids make it to the MLS. We've had kids come through. But how many youth national team players have we really had? I would say not enough, because the talent is here. It is here within, you talk about 60 miles, Andy, okay? You don't have to go much more than 60 miles to get a couple of million, actually kids, okay, that are in this catch basin. And that's the exciting part of it. And that's kind of our goals there, Jonathan.
Yeah, definitely. And Liam, I just wanted to bring you back in and say, people are still learning about this Hartford model. We're still all getting acclimated, and there's still going to be the initial practices with Coach Jaidi and his staff and eventually playing in games. But are there models like this that you've seen elsewhere, either a USL club or through your MLS background, that do work? Is this something that you view as unique, or is this something where there are other examples that in your mind kind of give you inspiration or a thought of saying, hey, this is why this could work because of reasons X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, no, I mean, Jonathan, frankly, this is a proven proof of concept, or it's already a proof of concept. So I had the privilege of, as I mentioned briefly, like working for Sporting Kansas City for about 7 years prior to taking on this role a year and a half ago with USL. And when I started that, we had just the club, which was honestly one of the more forward-thinking American clubs, period, not just in MLS. They had just launched a youth network, if you will, and we slowly started to build out this premier level of it called the Academy Affiliate Program, where we picked the best clubs all across the Midwest. And think about that, at the time in Sporting Kansas City, there wasn't even Minnesota or Nashville and barely any USL presence. So we had an 8-hour one-way drive time, 16-hour round trip back and forth was our catchment area. So we had to find a creative way to do this. We never would have had the staff to send, it wouldn't even been productive and efficient to be sending scouts out to Wichita and Iowa and Nebraska and Missouri. So instead, what we did is we created these mutually beneficial relationships where we said, hey, you're one of the top youth clubs in St. Louis and Omaha and Des Moines. We know you have good players. We know you have good staff. And we want to support what you're doing, even if it's just providing discounted tickets or sending an academy coach to do coaching education, run a camp with you guys, create a new exclusive tournament for those clubs. There's a whole host of benefits and ideas and value that our professional clubs can offer. And frankly, everything we built at Sporting and the gold standard affiliate model we built was also just taking ideas from other proven models. FC Dallas had and has an incredible affiliate model. Chicago Fire was another early adopter of that sort of model. And even since then, I've been incredibly pleased to not just see Hartford, but other clubs like Birmingham Legion and Tampa Bay Rowdies, for example, really start to take on that more club neutral approach as well. And I just like to give a little anecdote to really drive home one of the things Bruce said. So between my experience at Sporting, where sometimes I would drive 6 hours round trip to a place like Omaha, we would find players. I grew up in Western Massachusetts, in Hadley, right near Amherst, north of Springfield, Holyoke. Hartford is the airport that I fly into when I go home. And so think about me as a young kid growing up, just like those kids in Omaha that I scouted at Sporting. When I was growing up, professional soccer finally came to the States, and I had aspirations of maybe someday could I reach it. I either could do a 3-hour round trip drive to the Revs, a 6-hour round trip drive to New York. Now, the next Liam coming up in Western Mass could feel like that dream is a little bit more realistic because it's only a 90-minute drive down to Hartford. So that in and of itself is proof that there are kids that are in these pockets of our country that just have never had realistic access to professional soccer without having to do the Clint Dempsey story of driving or leaving their home at 14, 15, which is culturally a pretty big challenge for a lot of American families. So I'm incredibly excited as we build more and more professional pathways in all these markets that frankly have been underserved for quite some time. So
I appreciate you sharing that story. And as a New Englander myself, I know a lot of players and families who encounter those same challenges on a daily basis. And for the Southampton point of view as well, I mean, that's a big part of this, where there's a lot of inspiration, a lot of educational partnerships between the clubs. And Mark, I believe you probably be best to speak to this, but why is it that a very established Premier League club and an up-and-coming USL Championship team have such a strong relationship? That is something that from afar, objectively speaking, might strike some people as not odd, that's not the right word, but unexpected perhaps. So why is it that you all are so bullish on what Hartford's doing, whether it's just the youth landscape or trying to have a better presence, help people understand how these two clubs come together and fit so nicely?
Yeah, I think it's probably worth, the first point would be for Paul and Bruce to explain how the partnership occurred. I suppose from our perspective as a club, since Raddy and Paul have been involved obviously with Bruce, everything you speak about here as today is absolutely the synergy we have as a club and everything we believe in. So, we see ourselves as custodians of the game. We're all there to be competitive, win games of football and develop talent. But actually, we still have a responsibility to have a legacy in what we do, and everything that Bruce has spoken about, doing things the right way for the benefit of the game. How do we grow the game? So for every talented player that makes that journey to the MLS and to the national team, actually, what about the 21 other players that were with him and the coaches that are alongside them and the officials in the game? How do we ensure soccer continues to grow with the talent that we've brought? And I think, but prior to how the introduction has come around, it's just such a natural place to work in, because we're all talking about the same thing. We have a real love of the game and doing it the right way, and everything starts in the community. So everyone who picks the ball up for the first time, and their parents, the officials, the field space, all that has to be in place. And the wider foundations we have there, the more chance of talent coming through. And everything that you guys talk, yes, there's an Atlantic Ocean between us and leagues apart, but actually it's a common goal, absolutely a common goal, and absolutely a natural, organic conversations we've been having really since we met Bruce and the team, and since Coach Adi and Paul have been involved. So I suppose how it's come around is very much down to Paul and Bruce, really.
Yeah, Paul, maybe you could explain it then from your point of view, just why these two clubs seem to fit together so adeptly.
Well, I always like to check in with the owner before I start talking about his football club. But no, Bruce, basically it's trust and the relationship I built with Bruce from a long time ago when we spoke about me maybe the possibility of going to Hartford as technical director. I'd already made my mind up that I wanted to go in a different direction. So that was when I first met Bruce, and we stayed in touch, and I got on really well with him. He's very enthusiastic, to say the least. And I thought I could offer some value. Roll on sort of a year and a bit, and Bruce reached out and said, I see you at Southampton now. And Southampton was for learning for me. I'll be totally honest with you all. It was to start again and learn, okay? And go in there when I got the opportunity through Matt to work with Raddy. I'd never met Raddy in my life. I'd never met a lot of the coaches. But it was a golden opportunity for me to go and learn, okay, and start again. So that's always a powerful story when you're asking others to learn as well. And I'd like to think I've seen quite a bit in 30 years, but I wanted to learn, and Bruce wanted to learn as well. So it made it a good fit. So when he asked if he could come and visit Southampton, I thought, fantastic. This guy here starting a club, he's doing a recce. He went to Palace, he went to Arsenal, and he asked to come to Southampton. So Southampton, being the club that they are, said yes to it. Bruce came in, took a good look. It's hot. I'm sure he was really impressed. I could tell by his face afterwards, although he did see a little bit of an argument on the training field because of the way we coach and the way it is. But he got a real insight into how a top Premier League club works and how it develops players and how the chain works and how they're able to get players through. So that was a great day. He then asked me, he said, can I create this at Hartford? And I said, absolutely, not with them resources, unless we can get some serious financial input, but we can create that, because what it is, it's good people, it's working together, and it's trying to have the most qualified people in their areas as you can, okay? So you're not always going to get the most qualified, but if they want to work to that, that was going to be the ethos. So we then, once I had left Southampton, we met up. We did, you know, and I'll say it with you guys, because I say this with total respect, we did have a model that was in place at Hartford, was given an opportunity to work to the levels that Bruce wanted. So for me, it was about what the owner wanted. I think it's really important for him to say what he wants, and then for us to all work towards that. So that's how it come about. We ended up changing over staffing, which wasn't what we wanted to do, because I'm an advocate of keeping people. It's not something that I believe in, but we started afresh. And I think the dynamic of Southampton and wanting to work with Hartford is fascinating, but not a surprise to me, because if you go into, if you turn up like I did, and I'm not always easily impressed, but when I turned up in the taxi at the training ground at Staplewood, I thought, oof, it's like the NASA of football here. But when I got in it, you couldn't have met more beautiful people if you tried. And when I was able to work closely with Raddy, closely with the gaffer, okay, so that bridge between 23s and first team, but also able to go to the Dome and watch the coaches train the young ones, the little ones. And that was the biggest bit for me, because without that clear message, I don't think you could have players in the first team. So it's all right talking about them when they're in there, and it's all right talking about 23s, but everybody should be taking credit and should be given that respect. And that's basically what I'm trying to create with Bruce at Hartford, that we can buy into something, because there was a clear message at Southampton, and it's very difficult to get a clear message when there's so many other clubs. So affiliating for me is about sticking to a plan, but being open, which I believe Southampton is, you know, to new ideas, but not changing it. So there's no confusion with the players as they come up through. And that's a challenge for us, I think, at Hartford, and a challenge for clubs in America. And that's why affiliating and all sharing the common goal and the same message can only be beneficial to the players. It's moved very quickly with Hartford, almost too quickly at times now, where we've become very attractive, and I'm very pleased about that. I'm delighted that we've become attractive to bigger clubs that now, you know, want to speak to us. We were just speaking to a big club yesterday, and they shared the same beliefs as Southampton, as Hartford. So we're building something that's very exciting at Hartford, where we're all pulling in the same direction. So unless I've missed anything there, that's how it came about, and that's how it's evolved and evolving.
Hey, Jonathan, if I could just step in for 1 second on that.
Go for it. Yeah, by all means.
I want to direct a question a little bit to Liam, because we're building this model, and yeah, the trip to Southampton was an inflection point. I can't describe to you guys, I hope you all get a chance to go over one day, the way that everyone at that club comported themselves was so professional. From what they were wearing to the handshakes that are required by every single person at the club. We can't handshake anymore, but handshakes that were required. When a guest is at Southampton at St. Mary's, it's not a question. They live by it. You come up and you introduce yourself and you shake hands. The first people I met there were some of the teachers of some of the young kids there, and they told me about something I never even I had no idea, which is something called an exit plan. And when players come up through Southampton, there's some that make it and some that don't. And the ones that don't, Southampton want to invest in educational programs for them and actually send them in many ways over to the USC universities. I heard that was my first introduction to Southampton. So it creates this kind of professionalism, this focus. And that's why I said, Paul, can we do that here in the US? And he's like, those things don't cost money. They really just cost the time and the ability to walk the walk on a philosophy. So that was kind of the connection. And we see our Southampton as our guide star, you know, that that we can learn from and grow. Liam, my question to you is really structural here in the United States. Let's assume for a second that we're building a positive model. And let's assume for a second that we can tap into young players in the United States, right, and in Connecticut. What do you see as some of the barriers, okay, to really bringing them up through? So if I have an 18-year-old, 17-year-old kid, and he wants to go to college next year, we identify this kid, he comes up through the USL Academy Cup, he plays on our team, he gets seen there, this kid's a player, this kid's at the level he could play for the USL Championship, okay? How do we get a kid like that who wants to go maybe to college, is not sure, playing in the USL Championship?
Yeah, no, it's honestly, it's a great question, Bruce, and it's an evolving variable right now in this country. I might say a few things that could come off as contentious, but I'll just try to be as off the cuff and honest as I can in how I view it, and anecdotally what I see going on around the country. Look, the best part is as USL grows, as MLS grows, as there are more clubs, there's more jobs to become a professional soccer player. Again, look at when I was growing up. There were only, I think, 10 to 15 MLS clubs, right? And even then, a lot of people wouldn't say that was like the best decision to go take that a job in MLS as a pro soccer player. A college scholarship is worth way more then. And now we're in this position where we have 47 USL clubs, professional USL clubs, and 26 MLS clubs. All those leagues are going to continue growing, especially League One at the Division III level. And so with that, I think now you have kids starting to think like there are more opportunities, like with Alfonso, to go straight from youth to professional soccer. The other big factor that I think we all have to acknowledge is the value of a college degree is not what it used to be. Again, take it from a guy who is somewhat recently removed from college, about 10 years ago. I still have college debt because I unfortunately tore my ACL twice before my 17th birthday. I've had 8 knee surgeries since. So I never got to pursue a college scholarship. I never got to go straight to pro soccer, even if I could have. And so at a certain point, though, like I'm sitting here with a bunch of college debt, and I know, let alone I have kids who I've coached personally who are now just about to start their own college careers. And yet with the uncertainty of COVID, and especially today, they might not even be able to go on campus. They might have their scholarship revoked. So then at a certain point, if you're doing an online degree, what's the difference between Southern New Hampshire University and Harvard? You know, and so at a certain, and yet you're paying a phenomenally different rate for those two educational experiences. And then you can take it even a step further. So I know some of our clubs are already working on this, and we as a league office are going to hopefully have a preferred option, as MLS has done with Southern New Hampshire University. I think to provide an answer to Bruce ultimately of what a solution could be is changing that narrative. So the next player that's coming through that has a college scholarship on the table, has been in the Hartford environment, sees a path to the first team, and then Bruce's staff also sees them as a player that they want to invest in professionally. And as a player, I think now it's about overcoming those social or cultural barriers. So going to the player and saying, look, we have 2 options. We could offer you this salary as a full-time professional, or we could do a hybrid where we offer you a slightly different salary, but we'll give you a guaranteed scholarship at a local university or an online college program, so they can still pursue both their dream of playing professional soccer and having a degree, partially or fully subsidized. The last piece I'll say, and this is something that already exists today, is we have the flexibility in USL of what we call the USL Academy contract. So this allows Hartford to sign any teenage prospect to a $0 contract. It gets them registered with us, with the federation, and it gives them insurance and clearance to not just train with Hartford's first team on a consistent basis, but even play professional soccer in championship while still maintaining that college eligibility. And that's where you're going to see eventually the USL Academy League come into play. Is you'll have these perfect stepping stones, whereas a kid transitions from youth part-time into academy, where they're still kind of living between both those worlds. Then you're going to have them transition part-time between academy and senior team. So a kid like Alfonso, who may or may not be ready to be, based on the depth chart of his position, be playing week in, week out in championship, can still train with pros, but get minutes playing at the youth level, with or without being on a professional contract. So I think that's what's the best part about this is we're giving players and families the flexibility, and we're honestly putting the decision back in their hands. Once they have an offer put in front of them or two, the family gets to decide what's best for them in their individual path, which again, wasn't always the case. I mean, even at Sporting, I would recruit kids and it was literally move, or this opportunity might not even be there for you in 6 months. You know what I mean? Which is a tough situation and position to put some families in, we felt. So again, more optimism for the future and from my perspective. I hope that kind of answered the question, Bruce.
Thank you.
No, I think that's important. And I would just try to branch it one step forward and say, Bruce, you were making the slightly tongue-in-cheek remark about how when you guys were overseas shaking hands at Southampton, nowadays you can't have that, but that makes me think, okay, this world of academy soccer, youth soccer, has been given the COVID treatment. Everything in our lives has. Everything has changed. Maybe, I don't know who would be best to turn to for this, but I just kind of wanted to leave it open-ended for anyone who wants to chime in. I mean, we are having this conversation in an uncertain time around COVID and not sure kind of where these next chapters go. How do you guys kind of view this era of youth soccer really evolving? Because so much has changed in these last few months. So much will continue to change. Liam, I see you nodding your head, so I'm guessing maybe you have some immediate thoughts, but this is a very, I'm trying to think of the right word. It's a pivotal moment where we're going to see youth soccer either go through its ups and downs through COVID or try to come up with a model after this that really works for everyone across the board. And just curious if anyone has any thoughts on how COVID could impact the direction of youth soccer development here in this country.
Happy to kick it off if you want.
Go for it. Yeah, by all means.
Do you have something you want to say? Bruce, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, no, Liam, I'll just chime in, then you go. But Jonathan, I think one thing that we see in a crisis, and I see it across my business and Hartford Athletic, is that crises take trends and accelerate them. Everything's being accelerated right now. And actually, that's the positive of a crisis. So we would not be moving as fast as we are moving on the youth side, but for COVID-19, period. Absolutely not even close. We are moving probably, Paul said maybe too fast, but Paul's smarter and he knows this more than me, but we're moving because we had this period of time, which you almost never get as a small club in USL that's trying to grow. And I think that's the key, is that this acceleration. With the U.S. soccer getting out of the academy, now that opened up a vacuum also. So again, the acceleration happens. It gives us motivation to move forward faster and hopefully in a smarter way. So I think that's, for me, it's been a positive in the sense, I know it's weird to say, but positive in the sense of focus, of attention. And we could get Southampton on they're always available to us. Paul's working on this, coach is working on this. Luis, who's an amazing assistant that we have. These are guys that have been focused on the first team for the last 3 months, and we really had the time. So I just want to mention that. And then after Liam speaks, Jonathan, one other thing for Liam. I'm sorry to jump in because I don't get this opportunity. I do want him to talk about, and I think it's important for Southampton to hear, where America's going in terms of compensation. Development compensation. I think that's another foundational bedrock move America has to make if we're going to try to win the World Cup in 2026. We have to join the rest of the world in paying for these great clubs, whether it's an Oakwood or a Beachside or a Jenga or whoever it is, premier clubs here in Connecticut. If we can't find a way to compensate for all the hard work that they're doing to develop these kids, I think that's another barrier, but I'd like to hear Liam on that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
No, and they honestly tie into each other in some ways, frankly. So to go to Jonathan's first question, I mean, this piggybacks off what Bruce said for sure. It's travel and finances, right? And so first you look at the financial aspect where like every single component or participant in soccer in this country is affected. Our professional clubs are strained. They're spending a lot of money with little to no revenue coming in. Our colleges are shutting down their programs. Our kids are losing scholarships. Coaches are losing jobs. Youth clubs are furloughing employees, are losing out. Our facilities aren't hosting events that are bringing in revenue, which also brings in hotel revenue for the local government. Individual families aren't working. They're not in a position where they can be paying these high pay to play fees. And then even those that are lucky enough to not be affected by all that trickle down effect, the clubs that maybe planned well enough to have some extra money in the bank, could keep their staff, retain their programs, are in a part of the country where you can even still play soccer and have families that are affluent enough to be able to still pay for that experience. How many want to get on a plane or a bus or be spending time in hotels in random cities? You know, that in and of itself is what's partially creating this ultimate pause and this moment for us to, like Bruce said, finally say, you know what, I don't have a game on the weekend or some immediate training session I have to plan. So we can stop and say, is this really the way things should structurally be set up or not? And it gives us an opportunity to sit back and talk amongst each other. And I think that's why Bruce has had the opportunity to, you know, it's not that they internally didn't just have the opportunity to plan about this new youth program. For a fact, this also gave Bruce and his staff the opportunity to talk to the state association and the leaders and directors at all of these clubs in that portion of New England, who are probably already primed and ready to be active participants in this new model. So all that is incredibly encouraging to me. And then to that point, we at let's consider USL like a key stakeholder in the future of the direction American soccer progresses, along with MLS and US soccer especially. The reality is, like, the professional soccer is going to become, as you see in other countries, and as our friends in the UK at Southampton would acknowledge, as football in countries become more developed, it's the pro clubs and the pro leagues that are ultimately the real driver. And the more that we can work in unison, as you see the EFL and the EPL have a healthy relationship together, the more we're going to collectively support our national team programs organically, right? Without the federation necessarily having to be super hands-on. And so to that point, on one hand, you saw MLS make a public statement last year about FIFA's RSTP, the regulation regulation of sales and transfers of players, which dictates when players sign or transfer between different countries to professional contracts. MLS and USL are active participants in that. It hasn't been something that is actively done a ton, but if there is a player that Hartford develops in their academy and we can show a player passport through registration that they were a part of the program and Hartford invested in their development, and they happen to sign in Europe for their first pro contract, Hartford and we as USL, we will support them in looking to acquire training compensation or some form of a solidarity payment of a future transfer. However, in saying that, again, that's just for an international situation. They also have the freedom to set up a relationship with a club like Southampton or any other club where you could do pre-contract negotiations. So maybe if the guys at Southampton see something in Alfonso or a future player that comes up through Hartford, you could already set up a contract where the player has the opportunity to move to Southampton, and maybe there isn't an immediate fee for that, but that there's a sell-on clause guaranteed if Southampton's then able to move that player on to another destination. The other piece I'll say, and this is something that is frankly uncharted territory for American soccer, but something that we as a league office see as being very important to the future of getting more people like Bruce to want to invest in youth development, is domestic training compensation. And again, like, we would love if the federation is someone that supports that, but if not, our hope is that we can set up a relationship with MLS, similar again, like you see with EFL and EPL, where if a player is at any of these clubs for a certain amount of time and signs pro with a different club, that developing training club gets some form of training compensation. It's funny, like, there's already some examples where MLS would frankly benefit from doing this already. Just a couple quick ones, like a week or two ago, Orange County in the championship in Southern California, they signed a U17 U.S. Youth International to his first ever professional contract, 16-year-old kid. He was at Inter Miami. Inter Miami should be getting training compensation, but will not right now, even though they invested in his development. Or you look at today, Atlanta United announced their 7th homegrown signing, Josh Wolf's son, Taylor, I think. He was in the Columbus Crew Academy for 4 or 5 years. So more of his development, in fact, Columbus should be due training camp from a fellow MLS club, but no one's policing that right now. And so my belief is that right now MLS clubs are developing more players than they're even going to be able to sign right now to pro contracts, which inevitably is going to be a benefit to our USL clubs because those kids are still going to want to go play professional soccer and be serviceable pros, even if they're not ready for an MLS first team. And so at the end of the day, I think we want, this is also, if that was a component, it would get far more American businessmen who are investing in USL to feel like they would get an ROI from that initial investment, and that there would also be some level of protection over the player within their system. And frankly, it would also encourage what Bruce has already said they want to do strategically. They want to push players on. They don't want to necessarily keep Alfonso forever. Maybe his next destination is the Revs. Maybe it's Southampton. Maybe it's a club in 2nd division Belgium. You know what I mean? But like if we can incentivize those first few steps, it's only going to help create a culture where USL sees themselves as a developmental selling league, and one that in turn young Americans will say, wow, Hartford's a club that not only wants to invest in my development, but wants to help me progress my career. And if that can be done in a mutually beneficial way where the club benefits financially too, it's a win-win in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, we still got to figure out how we get from here to there, but I'm optimistic we're finally moving in that direction.
Yeah, a lot of points to connect there. And Andy and Mark, I just wanted to, as we kind of near the end of this, just wanted to give you guys the chance to chime in too. I mean, I think that concept of solidarity payments, training compensation, et cetera, is very foreign still to a lot of American soccer consumers, but overseas it's just part of the everyday parlance. Help people understand a little bit better just how embedded that is in the football culture in the UK. Because like I said, the American soccer consumer might view it as something foreign, but for you guys, it's so ingrained in everything, to my understanding at least.
Yeah, do you mean in the compensation element of young players when they move?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Yeah, I suppose from the outside, not in terms of the football side, but from Bruce's perspective, clearly he's investing a huge amount of time and effort and finances in a vision to deliver success to the national game. So if people were to just leave out the door and not have any return on that investment to then go again with the next group, it just seems from the outside looking in an unfair system. And ultimately we appreciate this is evolving, and I'm sure there's an appetite for things to change, but it does feel like the missing piece to have a viable business model, because Southampton has always been built on, to Bruce's point, we don't mind if players in the first team do well and move on. And as we know, there's, the economic situation drives that, whether that's through the player or the clubs needing to get a return on that if their contract's going down. So we're a club that's no different to Hartford in that sense. We have to ensure that there's a business model to reinvest back in. So this feels like the missing piece that would hopefully help and drive more people like Bruce to be successful and invest time and money knowing there's a viable business model for it to succeed again and the next players to come through.
Definitely. No, and I would just say that we could probably talk for hours about all these conversation points. I think it's indicative of perhaps the fact that American soccer has not quite yet got it right. There's still many, many conversations to have about numerous topics, but I think we can all agree it's exciting to see the direction that Hartford's going in such a short period of time. The Southampton element I know is commendable as well, and it's great to see the unification between these two clubs, and hopefully we'll be seeing, I know we are going to be seeing, barring unforeseen circumstances, Hartford Athletic games back on the field, the youth platform getting underway, and I just want to thank everyone for chiming in with their thoughts and perspectives on what I hope is an educational and informative discussion for others as well. So a massive thank you.
Jonathan, could I just build on that for 2 minutes at the end?
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
I think it is a crucial part, and for Liam and especially Bruce, the only way of protecting the assets at the moment is to sign the player professionally. Okay, at 15, there's pluses to that, but there's pitfall too, and affiliations where there's contracts involved. I think that a club like this is where you can look at a club like Southampton and look at a USL club, and we're a million miles apart in how we run. Okay, so we must sort of pull away a little bit there and look at and what I would say is, and I know Liam's keen to make a visit to the UK and look at every single aspect of development and clubs and maybe work from League Two all the way up to the Premier League as to how they survive. And it is, if you take Exeter City, which I was part of for a good 10 years, their model, and they're not afraid of it, their model is getting players through the system and selling them for big money. And they have done that successfully. So it is a massive talking point and a point of discussion, because what it does, it makes you accountable as well, because you have to make decisions on players. You have to give time frames with players. You have to give them time to develop. If they do leave, sell-on fees are crucial. I saw it at Exeter myself with a player like Dean Moxey that took a long time to develop. Okay, and Steve Perriman, who was an expert in protecting the club, short, medium, and long term, put in that contract, for internationals. And at the time, we were all like sort of laughing because you couldn't see Dino playing an international game or Jamie Mackey or these players. But they went on. And every time they succeeded somewhere, Exeter got some much needed money to recycle back into their football club. Where USL clubs can do well out of bigger teams is sometimes, and Mark might hopefully might agree with me here, is that pathways are big at the top end. So they can't block pathways. So sometimes they'll have to lose a player at say 21, at say 21, to bring another player through. Does that make sense? So you then, as a Hartford Athletic or even as an Exeter, can take that player off of them, develop them and sell them for a lot of money. So I think contracts are crucial. I think, that's my next stage now is I'm going to get my hands on 2 or 3 contracts that have been done, okay, with certain players, and would like to obviously share that with Bruce and obviously with Liam at USL, because it's a vital part to protect the club and make it really, really productive fiscally for the clubs.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point, and thank you for chiming in with that. It's a deeply embedded part of the business model of many football clubs to have that sell-on aspect. And just as we kind of wrap things up, I just want to again extend a big thank you. I know we're covering 3 or 4 time zones at the moment, so coordinating this has been no small feat. But again, hope everyone stays safe, stays well, and hopefully the next Hartford youth soccer related conversation is about many more Connecticut soccer players coming through the pipeline, which would be exciting to see.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Cheers,
guys.
guys. Good to see you.
Take care.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.
See you, Mark. Bye.